Hi there and welcome back to The Aging Grace. My name is Andrew Blakey, your host, and today I want to get a little bit real with you guys. So let me just ask you, how many times have you told yourself, I just need to feel motivated again? Or I'll start on Monday, or I'll get back on track once things calm down. Now, listen, you're not alone when you say or feel these things. I've done the exact same thing when it comes to areas of my own business as well as my own health. We're all guilty of it. And maybe you've had moments where you were all in. You started a new workout plan, you meal prepped, you got all that fresh workout gear. But after a few days or weeks, that spark faded. You stopped feeling motivated. And when that happened, everything kind of fell apart. Well, that's because, in my opinion, motivation is kind of like a sugar rush. It feels good for a little while, but it disappears fast. And there's a saying that I love, and it's that motivation follows action, not the other way around. Motivation follows action. And I think that all too often we think about motivation being the kicker that allows us to work out, allows us to meal prep, allows us to do whatever it is that we say that we want to do. But I'm here to tell you that that's actually not how it works, not if you want to be successful in making a change in your life anyways. So here's what no one tells you. The most successful people, the fittest, the strongest, the healthiest people, they're not motivated all the time. And when you're using things such as social media, you see all the highs of people working out, and it does seem like they're motivated all the time. But the reality is they're not. I'm not. There's days where I don't feel like going to work out, but I do it anyways because I know that it's good for me and because I know that if I can just get there, then the motivation does eventually come once I've started. And that is the difference. You know, people who reach these different health goals, they don't rely on motivation, they rely on discipline. And I can tell you right now that some of the best training sessions that I've been involved in, either with myself training or training with my clients, it was when we didn't really want to show up. Days where we were exhausted, busy, or sore, or when there's all those different excuses that are sitting in front of us, but we showed up anyways. And that's the key. People who succeed, they're not special. They're just consistent. And consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from discipline. So today we're breaking down exactly why discipline is better than motivation, why relying on motivation is, unfortunately, in my opinion, a losing strategy, and how you can build rock solid discipline, even, again, kicker, when you don't feel like it. So let's get into it. So let's start with the biggest problem. Motivation is completely unreliable. It's temporary, it's unpredictable, and it's based on how you feel. In my opinion, it's just like feeling happy or feeling sad. It's emotional and it can come and go sometimes without any rhyme or reason. And there was a really interesting article that I read, and it was by the International Journal of Academic Research in Business and Social Sciences. And they were basically exploring how burnout and stress can affect our motivation. And they really brought up some great points about how when we experience burnout or when we experience areas and times of our life where we're going through a lot of stress, our motivation can really be affected, right? And that, I think, probably isn't surprising. But when all of us have our own different stresses, we all have got different things that we're coping with and that we're going through at any given time, right? I mean, I think at this age and at this point in our lives, we all know that life isn't easy, right? But if we let all these different things that we're going through affect our motivation and we only act when we're motivated, then again, how can we be consistent with anything that we set our mind to or any sort of goal that we have with our health? I think that makes it really, really difficult. And that's another reason why I don't think that we can or are able to rely exclusively on motivation when it comes to acting on our goals. And if you only train or you only eat well or you only work on your goals when you feel motivated, motivation is almost just like a dopamine hit. It's that rush of excitement when you start something new. But as soon as the excitement wears off, your brain stops releasing as much dopamine and you start looking for the next shiny thing. And I think in order to understand how we work towards our goals, it's important to understand a little bit more about this chemical that we call dopamine. Now, dopamine is often referred to as the reward chemical, right? But it's one of its big jobs is to help motivate us towards rewards and not just to make us feel good. And there's lots of evidence that shows that dopamine is involved in things such as anticipation, persistence, and not just pleasure. And when we talk about anticipation and persistence, then it's impossible to not talk about our goals, because when we're working towards a goal or something that it is we want to accomplish, there is a sense of anticipation and there is a sense of being persistent towards it. And so when you set a goal, dopamine is released, right? And our brain releases it because it perceives that there's a potential reward coming up. And it starts to kind of release this dopamine to help encourage us to do something about it and us to start working towards it. And that's one of the really big reasons why you feel so excited when you start a new fitness plan, or you start a new diet plan, or you set a big goal. And as you start to make progress before it, then dopamine levels rise. There was a study in Nature Neuroscience back in 2018. It found that dopamine levels increased when you move closer to a goal. But the opposite is also true, that dopamine drops if the goal feels too big or too far away, or if the progress is slow, or the results aren't something you're able to see. And that's a lot of a big reason why people might quit a fitness program or lose that motivation that we're talking so much about today. When you look at any kind of goal that you've had in your life, you feel really, really good at the beginning working towards it, don't you? And if you're fortunate to have an experience like this in your life where you're just so motivated and you're in that flow, it feels incredible, doesn't it? Even you could be working a 12, a 14, a 16-hour day, and you get to the end of it and you feel, wow, that was a great day, right? And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why people program hop or diet hop or give up. They're addicted to the rush of starting, but they haven't built the discipline to keep going. And so here's the truth. Motivation, it's a mood, and moods change. And if you're relying on motivation to stay consistent, I think that we're kind of playing losing games. So this is where discipline comes into play. So if motivation isn't the answer, then what is? It's discipline. Discipline is a habit. It's a system. It's doing what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. Now, the author of Atomic Habits, James Clear, he puts it really perfectly in his book, in that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. That means if you don't have a system, if you're just relying on motivation, then it makes it really, really hard to hit those goals. So there was another study from Stanford University, and they found that self-discipline is the number one predictor of long-term success, more than talent, more than intelligence, more than motivation. And the same study found that people who focus on identity-based habits, for example, I am somebody who works out, instead of I should work out, are far more consistent. More examples of that are I am somebody who meal preps. I am somebody who, goes to bed early. I am, insert whatever it is here. And it's not just some sort of mumbo jumbo kind of affirmations. It's getting yourself to the point where, because of this consistency of doing whatever habit it is, you are actually that person. It's not just telling yourself that you're that person. It's giving yourself a track record of consistency that now makes you that person. And in other words, discipline isn't about forcing yourself to work out or eat right. It's about becoming the kind of person who does those things no matter what. So how do we build discipline? That is the big question, right? How do we actually do it? We now know the importance of discipline, but what are the things that you need to be doing in order to build this? I'm going to call it a muscle. Discipline is a muscle, right? The more you work it and the more you train it, the more developed it becomes. So there's 3 powerful strategies that I think will make it automatic. And number 1 is lowering the barrier. So the biggest mistake that I see people make is that they try to do too much at once. If you're struggling with consistency, making the first step so easy that skipping it would be ridiculous is a great step towards building that discipline muscle, right? For example, if you don't like working out, tell yourself, okay, I'm just going to put on my exercise shoes. I'm just going to, go for a short walk, right? And I know that this sounds a little bit silly. You're probably thinking, okay, how is that ever going to work? But I actually have a story of this exact example in practice. There was a lady that I worked with probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Um, she had never really done much working out. She had tried a ton of different programs, and unfortunately, she kind of fell off the wagon for all of them. And I was essentially kind of like her last resort, if you will. But basically, we started working together. I would go to her condo and I would train her twice a week. And she had a desk job. She'd be seated most of the day. So she actually didn't have much activity in the days that we didn't work out together. And so one of her goals and one of our goals was to get her to get more movement in her day. So she came up with the idea to go for a walk on the days where we're not working out. And in order to do that, we basically just made one little change. We basically put her running shoes in the middle of her living room. And I mean, you can put them anywhere, but the caveat behind this and the reasoning behind this is because you literally have to walk over those running shoes for you to not do it. And every single time you walk over them, that's it's almost like it's seeing them makes you think about it. It makes you being aware of this new habit that you're trying to be consistent with. Sometimes that reminder is enough for us to say, okay, you know what, I actually need to go do this. I need to go for this walk, right? And if you don't see these running shoes, or if you don't have different sorts of cues throughout your day that reminds you of it, it's easy for us to get to the end of the day and to not even think about whatever habit it is that we're trying to do. And so that's why this particular example is a powerful one. It's that by putting cues for whatever it is that you're trying to do throughout your day or throughout your environment, it can make it much more easier for you to remember it, essentially, right? And for it to be on your mind, which is going to help you to kind of pull that trigger a little bit more. So once you start with lowering the barrier, the momentum kind of takes over. The second point is removing emotion from the decision. So our first step in this 3-part strategy for building discipline, the first one is lowering the barrier, and the second one is removing emotion from the decision. And this is big. Most people lose because they let their feelings decide their actions. You don't wake up and ask yourself, do I feel like brushing my teeth today? You just do it, right? And discipline is about treating your workouts, nutrition, and self-care the same way. They're non-negotiable. And so when we can now look at the different actions we want to do in our day, say it's working out, say it's going for a walk, and understand these are non-negotiables because you are a certain person, you are somebody who works out, you are somebody who meal preps, then that makes it so that you're much more able and willing to do whatever it is that you need to do, right? Again, discipline is about treating your workouts, nutrition, and self-care the same way. They're non-negotiable, right? And the last part is stacking wins to continue to build identity. Now, small wins create momentum, and that's what a lot of the stuff of what we're talking about today is about, creating momentum, right? If you show up even for 5 minutes for a walk or to the gym, you reinforce the identity of somebody who stays consistent. And when you start seeing yourself as a disciplined person, everything changes, right? And so the most important thing of this conversation today is that action comes first, motivation follows. And most people think they need to feel motivated before they act. But the truth is, again, motivation is created by action. In the 2019 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, they found that people who start small, consistent habits experience a long-term increase in motivation and confidence. So instead of waiting to feel motivated, just start. Even if it's small, even if it's messy, even if it's not perfect. And that's one of the things I always preach is that when it comes to health, when it comes to fitness, it doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to start. Because the more you act, the more momentum you build, and the more disciplined you become, the more unstoppable you are, right? These little things that we're doing today that are reinforcing a new identity of somebody who works out, somebody who does the meal prepping, all these different things, the more that you are reinforcing this idea of a new identity, the more that that's going to change essentially your future, right? When we start to build these consistent habits, it's like every single time you do that, that's a check in the column saying, I did this, I did this, I did this. And in, a year, 3 years, 5 years, you and your health are going to be in a completely different place than you could have even ever imagined just by doing small actions. And so at the end of the day, success isn't about who works the hardest when they feel motivated. It's about who shows up when they don't. Motivation, it's the spark. It gets you started. It gets you, into a new routine. It gets you starting with a new fitness plan. But just like we talked about today, when that motivation fades, you need something else to keep you going. And discipline is the fire. It keeps you going, right? And so if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Stop waiting for motivation. Motivation is great for so many things in that it can be that little thing that gets you started. But start building that discipline. Start making it a habit. Make it a non-negotiable and make it who you are. Because the people who succeed, they don't feel like it every day. They might feel like it very rarely, but they just do it anyways. So that's all I got for you today on the Aging Grace. Thank you very much for listening. If you haven't subscribed, click the follow button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast so that you never miss another episode again. If you have any questions, if you have a topic that you want me to cover, then send it to me over on Instagram at @IamAndrewBlakey, and I can't wait for next week's episode. This is the Aging Grace.